Raising your children to be obedient set them up to fail in the future. Dr. Kalshman, I researched the unwritten rules of work for the working class, and I made the video a few days ago using examples of the succession characters on how rich kids are raised to challenge, negotiate, and not necessarily be obedient. But working class kids are raised to be obedient and conform to authority. This is to survive. But as someone who's researched people who've experienced class transitions for the past decade, I know that one of the unwritten rules of work they hit is that they have trouble knowing how and when to challenge authority to get to the next level. I posted a blurb about this on LinkedIn, and someone left a really thoughtful comment. She said, when my babies were toddlers, I remember watching as my son let another kid take his toy, which I allowed because I was trying to teach him to share. I then turned to my friend and said, I'm sometimes afraid I'm raising my kids to not succeed in the world. My friend nodded and said, same. It's so eye-opening. Don't steal, don't lie, don't cheat. Rules for we, not for thee. It was cut off, but she said, obedience is hard to break, and I wish that I had let my oldest son just be more selfish. I replied, telling her where my videos are, and also told her that my family does the same thing, and that right now I have young nephews, ages 4 and 1.5, and several on the way, and they're being raised to be sharers too, and we all think it's great, and that I hated when I moved to college and had to live with people who hadn't been raised to be sharers. I'm not a parent, so I don't like to give parents advice, but something that I sit with when I think of becoming a parent is we have to also consider, even if we're not parents, if we're leaders in the workplace, if we're employees, are we rewarding behaviors that make the world a place that we want to be in? Because I just wrote a book about all of this, talking about the unwritten rules, one of them which is challenging authority, but carefully. There's the unwritten rule of independence, where you're supposed to speak up, and there's the unwritten rule of being assertive but not too aggressive, and there's the unwritten rule of being compliant, which is not disagreeing with people in power. And all of those rules have not just cost businesses billions or the whole business, and they have also cost us human lives. It doesn't even tap into the suffering that people experience with not having living wages or health care, etc. So the question we have to ask, and the question I ask in this book is, are we rewarding the right things? And for who? What can we do to challenge that? I have recommendations for leaders, staff, and HR at the end of every chapter. Because pushing back on these systems inherently will require some disobedience to authority. Because the authority is who makes the laws, and they make it to benefit them. That's where the critical thinking and obedience to who and why I think is really important. Because I was raised where it's admirable to never lose your beliefs, to always stand up for what you believe in. I had siblings who'd left the church. We were raised Catholic, and it was always talked about very negatively. I really didn't want to do that, and then I ended up doing it. I left the church, and I remember thinking that I wish it was more admirable to change your beliefs when you are presented with new information than it is to never change them at all. And that's a pressure that is pushed socially by the people who have gained a benefit from you staying under their control and listening to them. Obedience is tricky because I don't think you have to be selfish to be disobedient. I don't think obedience is inherent with selflessness, because if anything, you can be trying to prevent a bad outcome coming towards you. But obedient to who and why and what power and control they have over you is an important question.